God only knows. It's intractable. And you know, partly the way your temperament solves that problem, because it does, is say, well, a creature like you with your temperament preferentially attends to this set of facts. And that'll work, because attending to that sort of facts is likely to produce a reasonable outcome for you in most circumstances. And it's a way that you simplify the world and make a tremendous amount of it irrelevant. A priori filters. Okay, good. Now, the next cool thing. What happens when you see a tool? You're happy. What happens when you see an obstacle? You're unhappy. And there, now you understand emotions. And that's so, like, that doesn't take much. That's, once you've got this initial framework, it's like, okay, well, what's an emotion for? Positive. Move forward. Negative. Get away. Indeterminate. Stop. That's anxiety. Stop. You're not where you think you are. Your map isn't producing the desired outcome. It's wrong. What should you do? You don't know. Stop. Because if you don't know where to go, there's no point going anywhere. And then what? Prepare. That's anxiety. Stop. Prepare. Well, people hate that because, well, for obvious reasons. Prepare. For what? Everything. Yeah. Very, very demanding psychophysiologically. And that's also something that's really worth knowing. It's like anxiety isn't just a psychological state that's unpleasant. It's like you're revved up and you're burning resources like mad. And you're in a biochemical state such that that's optimized for quick action, but that's toxic if you inhabit it for any length of time. So not knowing what to do, that is not good. And it isn't just that it makes you feel bad. It hurts you, it damages you, it can kill you. It'll make you age, it'll make you fat, it'll give you diabetes, it'll suppress your immune system so you're more likely to develop cancer. It'll damage your brain, your hippocampus. It'll increase the probability that you have Alzheimer's. It's like, it's no joke that. It's you're running your machinery faster than you can replenish it. So it's not a state that you can be in. It's not a state you can tolerate because it's anxiety. It's anxious. But it's also not a state you can live in. And so, I don't know where I am means everything's relevant and I have to ramp up my capacity for action to deal with that. Bad. People do not like that. We do not like not to be where we think we are. We really, really, really don't like that. And we structure almost all of our environments constantly so that never happens. You know, we're all dressed the same with tiny, tiny variations, you know. We all follow the same traffic laws. Everybody's behaving according to the proper code in this room, and everyone in this building is doing the same thing. It's like we're doing everything we can to make sure that everyone knows exactly where they are and what they're doing all the time. And that's because when we're in that state, we can advance cautiously using positive things and maintain a modicum of positive emotion. That's what we're basically trying to do. Okay, so you want to set up your world so that you're surrounded by things that move you along your way, that obstacles are minimized, and that almost everything can be ignored. Okay, so emotion. Positive emotion, that's dopaminergic. That's incentive reward. You experience it in relationship to a goal. Because, you know, most of the time when you talk to behavioral psychologists, they'll tell you reward is a satiation consequence. You're hungry, you get a piece of food, that's rewarding. It's like, that's consumatory reward. And that shuts down the motivational system. It's satiating, it makes you satisfied. That's not the same as incentive reward. Incentive reward says, come this way, good things are over here, good things are over here. And that's dopaminergic. And that's the kind of reward people really like. We live for that. So when you talk about positive meaning in your life, this is an oversimplification, but a tremendous amount of that is incentive reward. You're in a goal-directed structure. It's a value structure. Let's say it's fairly well developed because you're sophisticated. Everything you do is linked to something else. You move ahead, it works, yes. You move ahead, it works, yes. And it's that constant moving ahead and the validation of the frame that makes your life meaningful. And so that also means no value system, no positive emotion, which is another thing that's so much worth knowing. You know, the postmodernists complain about value systems constantly, and they say, well, the problem with a value system is that it includes some people, winners, and excludes other people, losers. It's like, yes, that's true. What's the answer? Flatten the value system. It's like, so there's no losers. Fine, no winners either. And if the value system is flat, there's no point B, what the hell are you going to do? Where's your positive emotion? You got nothing to, you're going to wander around being happy that the value system is flat. It's like, no, you're not. Because when you flatten out value systems, you don't get rid of suffering, because you can't. All you get rid of is the possibility of positive emotion. And that is not a good solution. So then you leave people with nothing but negative emotion. It's so naive. Okay, so good. So now we know. You're going from point A to point B. You're doing that with an action. If things are working out, if you see facilitators along the way that you can utilize, you get a kick of positive emotion. You know, and you can even see that calibrated. Like, let's say you do better than expected on a test. Yes! It's like, that's better than doing as well as you expected. Because what the message is that not only am I moving towards my desired goal, but I'm moving along faster and with less effort than I thought. It's like, bang! Positive reinforcement. Right? You think, yes! Well, that's it. That's meaning. That's a big chunk of meaning. And so, a really meaningful event is one that gets you to the next step and simultaneously increases the probability that you're going to get to all the steps after that. That's like a maximally meaningful event. So, you know, you get, you're opening an envelope about whether or not you got into medical school. It's like you're going like this, right? Why? Why are you shaking? It's an envelope. No, it's not. It's a portal, right? It's a portal. And what's in that envelope either puts you that way into one world or that way into another. And you think, you're looking at it, you think, well, that's an envelope. It's like your body isn't thinking that, not for a bloody second. It knows perfectly well that that's a portal. And you open it up, it's like collapse. The whole, what would you call it? That whole avatar-related future just goes ashes. Or, bang, it springs into reality. And you perceive that, and that you perceive all of that almost instantaneously, and that produces that radical transformation in emotion. You're not reacting to the envelope, or maybe the envelope isn't what you think it is, or maybe the envelope isn't what you see, and that's more accurate. That's way more accurate. The envelope is way more than what you see. Okay, good. Let's break for 15 minutes, okay? And then we'll go ahead with the next part of this. Well, so that's just a transformation of the previous diagram. While you're moving around along from what is to what should be, we'll say, as long as things are working out, well, then you're mildly happy, and if they don't work out, well, then that's another problem. You see, these are different sizes. There's a reason for that, and that's because negative emotion has more potency unit for unit than positive emotion does. And so what that means is that people are more reactive. People hate a small loss more than they like an equivalent gain. And so we're tilted to some degree towards a bias for negative emotion. And that is also dependent on temperament, because somebody who's very, very low in neuroticism, that's basically anxiety and emotional pain susceptibility, something like that. So that would be the threshold for experiencing a certain level of anxiety or emotional pain, but also the length of time that would take to recover. It's something like that. And so, but for the standard human being, loss hurts more than gain rewards. And so, well, it's useful to know that because it helps you understand yourself and other human beings. Even if you're trying to motivate someone to do something, loss avoidance is often a powerful motivation as well as gain. So, all right, prevention, fundamentally. Okay, so now here's another way of thinking about this. And this is a more abstract way of thinking about it. So we talked about the idea that the world might be divided into tools and obstacles and irrelevant things, most of which, and irrelevant things, that's a huge category, and it's the one you don't want to have disrupted. And also that the obstacle category produces more emotion than the tool category. But here's another way of thinking about it. and this is thinking about it more from a purely emotional perspective. When you think about the world as tools, it's dead practical, and it's sort of grounded in the idea of motor usage in some sense. But you can think in an analogical fashion about the same system in a slightly different manner. You're in the situation that you're in right now, and that's not good enough. And so that's another thing that's kind of interesting about people, is they're chronically dissatisfied with the way things are. Well, that's okay, because you wouldn't be motivated to move forward if you weren't chronically dissatisfied with the way that things are. But it's kind of annoying, you know, because you might think, well, why aren't you just happy with what you have? And the answer to that is generally because I don't know if it's going to last. And so that's part of it. And the other is, well, if the situation shifted a bit, maybe I'd have more options, and some of that would be, it would last longer, it'd be more stable, it'd be more promising. And so you can say, well, you should be satisfied with what you have, but it's kind of really a stupid thing in some sense to tell human beings, because no matter what you have, it isn't going to solve your fundamental problem. So the problem isn't going away, and you can't just fool yourself into saying, well, what I have is great. You could say, I could have a hell of a lot less, and that would be bad, and most people have a lot less than me, and I should be grateful for what I have. That's fine, that's perfectly reasonable. But you're stuck in this, you're stuck with this chronic sense of unfinished business, and the reason for that is, well, you're permanently vulnerable, so how else would you, how could it be otherwise? And even if you've got your problem solved, then there's 3 or 4 people in your family that by no means have got their problem solved. So the problem of problems never goes away. That's an that's a good thing to know existentially too, because it helps you calibrate your life properly. Because you might be thinking, well, if I just got everything together, you know, I'd hit some plateau of satiation and stability, and then I would just be there. It's like, no, that's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. So you might as well just forget about that. It's a Sisyphus issue, you know, the guy who pushes the rock up the road and up the hill and it rolls back down. I think it was Nietzsche who said, we must presume Sisyphus to be happy, something like that. Well, maybe you want to push your damn rock up a hill, you know, it's going to roll down again. It's like, what are you going to do, just sit there by the rock? It's okay to be active, even if the problem you're trying to solve is not fundamentally solvable. That doesn't mean it isn't worth trying to solve. So, although people can despair about it, and it's not surprising. Okay, so another way that I should have really said, instead of predicted outcome here, this is like an old model. This would be a model that I derived from work that was done at least initially in the 60s, or even in the 40s. And that still underlies the thinking of, I would say, the vast majority of psychologists. It isn't that you're predicting outcomes and failing. It's not that. It's that you desire outcomes, and sometimes you get an undesirable outcome. And it's really important to get that distinction correct, because if you're thinking about expectation, it's just a cold cognitive model. It's like a rational model. I know the world, I understand its relationships, I can predict what's going to happen next. And that's what I'm trying to do, is predict it. It's like, no, you're not. You're not trying to predict it. You're trying to get what you want from it. And there's a prediction element to that, which is, well, you know, I'm going to pick that up, so that's a prediction. And that worked, verifying my prediction. But what's missing there is I want to pick that up. And you can't throw that out of the equation, because as soon as you throw motivation out of the equation, then you're stuck with the mystery of perception, right? So how do you organize your perceptions unless you want something? Well, you can't. So you don't get to get rid of the want and just substitute cold expectation. It's a sleight of hand. And the cognitive behaviorists do that. They almost always do that. That's how they, well, it's not like a conspiracy or anything. It's perfectly reasonable to have a simplified model for the way that people act, but you don't want to throw motivation and emotion out of the equation, because obviously or embodiment, they're so important. Okay, so forget predicted and unpredicted. Think desired and undesired. Okay, so I come walking in here and I have this low-level desire, which is to make my way to my podium with the least amount of effort necessary, and I see that chair's in the way and it's mildly annoying, and so there's something undesired there. So the desired outcome produces positive emotion. It's promise. What's technically speaking, you could also think about it as hope. It's related to the attainment of a goal. It indicates the potential attainment of a goal. That's what hope is, or what promise is.